of the student body's problem.
That's right. Not the problem of those seeking true scholarship, knowledge, and opportunity to engage. All right. Jasmine, always a pleasure having you on the program. Tell people how they can follow you, check out your great work.
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at YazK with 5 Z's, YAZZZZZK. And also you can check out my videos on The Breakdown with TYT on YouTube.
Always remarkable. Thank you. All right. Remember, take care of yourself, take care of each other, take care of the planet. Remember, the truth is always indisputable.
Hello and welcome to Unbossed. I am your host, Nina Turner, and in the co-host chair today, we have none other than Max Burns. Max, it's so good to have you back on the show. We got a lot to dig into today, so we're gonna get right to it. Jordan Neely, America, you should be absolutely outraged right now. We're going to talk about Jordan Neely. Jordan was an unhoused Black man who was murdered on a New York subway. We're going to show you what happened. Warning, this video is incredibly tragic and graphic, but we want you to know exactly what happened to this young man. Watch. My God, and for people to think that that was okay, I mean, you see, not only was Jordan in a chokehold, but there were two other men. One was holding his arms, another one was milling about, touching on him as well. I mean, it's just, I mean, it definitely gives me Eric Gardner vibes. That also happened in New York where police officers choked him to death. And dozens of people witnessed this murder. It was on the subway. However, the murderer, a 24-year-old former US Marine, has not been arrested. And the tabloids, along with more respected news outlets, issue glowing praises of the 24-year-old Marine. These headlines right here. NYC subway rider who placed unhinged man in deadly chokehold release. Cops. New York Post is calling him unhinged, when in reality he struggled with mental health issues, was hungry, was thirsty, and was unhoused. I think that would mess with your mind too. And here's some of the background. Police are investigating the death of a man who was allegedly harassing subway riders in NoHo before one passenger took matters into his own hands. Officials say the altercation happened around 2:30 p.m. on the train at the Broadway Lafayette Street station. A 24-year-old passenger stepped in to subdue a 30-year-old man who was acting erratically towards fellow riders. It's not clear exactly how the confrontation unfolded, but it does not appear that any weapons were used. Now, the medical examiner has now, that was reported earlier, but as of Wednesday, the medical examiner has ruled Neely's death a homicide. Man involved in subway encounter killed by chokehold, death ruled homicide, medical examiner. Now, Jordan Neely, 30, died from a compression of the neck. You saw that in the video, it was very clear. The city's medical examiner determined on Wednesday the following: Neely is recognizable to some New Yorkers as a Michael Jackson impersonator who regularly danced in the Times Square transit hub. On Monday afternoon, he was yelling and pacing back and forth on an F train in Manhattan. Witnesses and police said when he was restrained by at least 3 people, including a US Marine veteran who pulled one arm tightly around his neck. Now, let's bring in Max on this. Max, it was very, very clear by that video that he was being choked. And the fact that people in that moment could not see that was excessive, that the man's windpipe, like our windpipe is literally right here, is very troubling to me.
Yeah, I mean, this just shows you another step in the complete dehumanization, delegitimization of black bodies. I mean, you see people filming it like it's a movie. They're touching him like it's a circus attraction. This man is strangling a person to death with a chokehold that's barred in police departments. And what stuns me so much is that so many of the elected officials, the public leaders in New York who link arms with the left when times are good, are now disgustingly silent on this issue and have somehow lost the ability to say the word murder. I mean, we're chastising AOC for saying what everyone is aware of if you look at that video, that this was a murder, plain and simple.
Yeah, it was a murder, plain and simple. And I know that the mayor of that state wants to get into a back and forth with Representative Ocasio-Cortez instead of focusing on the main thing, which is a 30-year-old black man was, as you just said, murdered on the F train in his city, and people are acting like it was just another day. Because obviously when it comes to black bodies, and even before we actually started the show, Max, you and I were just talking about this, that some of the spirit or the essence or the zeitgeist of decades past or centuries past is still very much present in the 21st century, as much as it pains some people to admit it. Some people don't want to admit it because they don't believe that it ever was true that this country did anything wrong to anybody, less known black people. That's the DeSantis camp. Then you got some people who want to believe that all is right because we're not in the 20th or 19th century. You have some people who don't understand it at all, who are just absolutely oblivious. And your point about elected officials who want to lock arms and be happy-go-lucky when times are good, but will not stand when there's some pressure to stand up. And the fact that the media kept reinforcing the fact that the guy that choked out Neely, that killed him, was a Marine. Yes, that is a way to describe him, but they use that description as a way to absolve him from what he did. And then what they put on Neely is that he was acting erratic. He was unhinged. You see how words create worlds. There was a saying when I was growing up, I probably dating myself here now, but I'm fabulous at any age. But sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Nothing could be further from the truth. The way we label things and categorize things, what we uplift and what we press down, it does absolutely matter. And the description that media is given to Neely compared to the man who murdered Neely is like night and day. But it is nothing new when it comes to how this country continues to try to describe and stereotype the Black community, especially Black men. Your thoughts?
You're totally right. And it's up to us to push back against those narratives. I mean, the New York Post was not the only outlet to describe Jordan Neely as unhinged, when in reality, the unhinged person is the Marine who just executed a stranger on a subway car in the middle of the day. I feel like I'm crazy here. Like the idea that the person who is the victim of an unprovoked attack is somehow to blame for their own death. These are the same people who could not stop talking about how violent New York City was. And now suddenly when it's a white Marine killing a Black man, none of those people have a thing to say about crime.
Not a thing to say at all, Max. And because Neely didn't fit the proper category, he wasn't affluent, he's poor. And not only is he poor, he's unhoused. He has some mental challenges. He's on that train saying, he's crying out, letting us know that he really is very much a reflection of America. He's not the only one, but yet now his life is not as worthy, and it's being shown time and time again. And I was hoping, in the Nation magazine, I want to encourage all the viewers to go and read this. Eli Mistal wrote a just searing article in the Nation magazine about this, and just the headline of it: one man killed Jordan Neely, but we all failed him. And I think Eli got that exactly right. Everything about Neely's death is a symptom of our collective rot, from the way we treat poverty as a crime to the way we treat soldiers as weapons that can be stowed. I mean, he hit that. He covered that whole thing. A man was choked to death on the F train in New York City this week. The victim, who appeared to be homeless, was allegedly being hostile and erratic on the subway, but he wasn't being violent. He said that he was hungry and thirsty and that he was prepared to die. Another man who reports have identified as a former Marine put him in a chokehold and killed him. The murder happened in broad view of the other passengers and was captured on video. The alleged assailant was briefly questioned by police, then released. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg says the investigation is ongoing, and on Wednesday, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner ruled the death a homicide, but no charges have been filed as of this writing. And then Eli goes on, Max, and says, now, if I don't tell you any other thing about this story, I bet you can guess who was Black and who was white. And that right there is a searing indictment on America. He goes further to say that no Black Marine would have been able to put a white homeless man in a chokehold and murder him in broad open daylight with witnesses and walk away. He further puts an emphasis on that by saying that not even former President Barack Obama would have been able to put a white homeless man in a chokehold, kill him in broad open daylight, and walk away. A searing, Max, a searing indictment on 21st century America.
It really shows you exactly where we are, which is that the right is dispensing now with this myth. The stand your ground lie was always just a stepping stone to this, which is that you don't need a reason to kill a homeless person. Because as Donald Trump says, these people are infected, need to be handled, need to be moved into camps outside of cities. Republicans have been dehumanizing people for decades and are at the point now where they feel comfortable saying, yeah, this Marine did a good service by executing Jordan Neely. They say he was hospitalized or arrested 40 times for psychiatric issues, but that's a failing of our state, not Jordan Neely. The city had 40 attempts to get him care, and 40 times they did not. And this is what happened.
That's right. They failed them, and we fail. The collective, we fail people like him every single day because of the way the system is set up. This is an example of a systemic failure, and because there was not an immediate arrest of the man responsible for Neely's death, some people are calling out the disparate treatment, and rightfully so, and the bias in the media reporting and the headlines, and even larger than that, our own biases as American people, because we've all been socialized in the same society, Max. And it doesn't matter if you're black or white or Asian or Hispanic or whatever, the swirl in between, unless we deconstruct our constructions on matters of race and ethnicity, we can carry those same biases and see some people as less deserving, less human. And that is exactly what happened to Jordan Neely. So for advocates working on the issue of poverty and police abuse, there was a simple reason Neely's killing happened the way it did. And why? In the aftermath, nothing seemed out of the ordinary when the killer was set free. Fear-mongering rhetoric about homelessness and crime from Democratic New York leaders, Governor Kathy Hochul and Mayor Eric Adams. And let me rest right there for a minute, because Max mentioned the Republicans and their hypocrisy shining through per usual. Let's just go ahead and sprinkle a little of that Democratic hypocrisy on it, shall we? Because the leaders of the state of New York, a Democrat. The leaders of the New York City, a Democrat. And even they seem to believe that this was okay. They done drank the Kool-Aid on this as well. Now, other responses and reactions that Max and I are going to react to. Let's put up what Dr. Bernice King had to say about this situation. She said the New York Post language in describing the man who was killed is extremely biased and unfortunate, unfathomable that the killer who put another human being in a chokehold and ended his life was released. What precedent does this set? And she directs it at, the New York City Police Department and the New York City mayor, rightfully so. Put it where it belongs, Dr. Bernice King. Another reaction we're gonna have here, Benjamin Dixon, an activist and also a journalist. Jesus, when I was hungry, you fed me. Those who are familiar with the Christian Bible, there's a scripture there. When I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was in prison, did you come to see me? When I was thirsty, did you give me water, et cetera, et cetera. And then Dixon says, white evangelists to evangelicals to Jordan Neely. The dude was killed. The dude who killed the violent subway bum better get his ass to Florida. Hope DeSantis will refuse to extradite him. It would be smart politics. I mean, Max, they taking this as it is a game.
No, it absolutely is. And it's a game that's always stacked in Republicans' favor, because in the right's viewpoint, for the attacker, any reason is a good enough reason. For the victim who was murdered, no defense will be good enough to convince them, because there is no defense someone who is low income, someone who is unhoused can put forward, because they're not people. And in Republican view, this is gonna be another Kyle Rittenhouse folk hero here. I wouldn't be surprised to see him on whatever post Tucker Carlson Fox News show they have next week.
Oh yeah, they'll have a GoFundMe page for him, raising money for him right now. I mean, that is probably happening as we speak, Max. That's what's gonna happen. And then Representative Jabari Bridgeport, Jordan Neely was lynched. He had no food, no water, no safe place to rest. He had the audacity to publicly yell about the massive injustice, so they killed him. Right on, Representative Bridgeport. And then Bishop Talbert Swain, who's always known for telling it like it absolutely is, without fear. This is Jordan Neely, a homeless black man with a history of mental illness, being choked to death by an ex-Marine for allegedly yelling at passengers. NYPD let his killer go. Imagine a black ex-Marine choking a homeless white man to death and police letting him walk away. Well, we really don't have to imagine that, because that would have never happened at all, America. And in lies the problem. Again, Max, what I was thinking about this story did very much make me think about Eric Gardner, who was choked out by police, which is one of the reasons why they can't use the chokehold now. He had to be sacrificed for that, but this police officer jumped on this man's back because he was selling loose cigarettes. They knew exactly who Eric Gardner was, just in the same way they knew who Neely. He's known because of the number of times that he's had to be picked up and people, trying to get him some help, even if it's temporary. They know exactly who this man is. But back to Eric Gardner, it's the same thing. It was the same kind of callous indifference. If he hadn't resisted, or if he wasn't selling loose cigarettes, he wasn't violent to police officers, he wasn't disrespectful. Because see, we always gotta qualify the behavior of Black people. See, Black people's behavior, we gotta go the extra mile to qualify Black humanity. And in lies the problem, America. It's not, even though the right wing, they are total absolute hypocrites. Max, I argue to you that there are Democratic hypocrites as well, and we calling them all out.
Without a doubt, and there always have been. The important thing is pushing through there, pushing them to act where we can and pushing past them where we can't. And like you said, the reality with this is that this is a story of dehumanization. This is a story of a man who was killed for simply being loud, for being unwelcome in a place where he had every right to be. And at the end of the day, the fact that our own Democratic leaders have played a part in dehumanizing him and making that impunity possible requires a lot of soul searching from us as individuals and as a party.
Yeah, it does, Max. Each and every one of us, party affiliation or not, this is really a sad reminder of how far we have yet to go in these United States of America. Wrap your mind around this. Our condolences to Jordan Neely's family, and really condolences to this country, because this is a sad commentary that in the 21st century, the very variables that people who look like me had to contend with in the 20th century, in the 19th century, in the 18th century, is still an absolute reality. This is indeed a stain on America. Max and I'll be right back after this.
All right, well, the Young Turks special election day coverage dropping.
An amazing power panel.
Look at this panel. You want to talk about power?
It's like a smart Destiny's Child.
We're all too strong.
We spun a revolution. Yes, another one.
Aren't you excited?
Wow. And then Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, everybody. Yay!
You know, this is where it started in a lot of ways.
Why is he lying? Because these are acts that you can commit with impunity.
Most of us are usually in boxer shorts underneath.
I went with the pants today.
This is the first ever power panel with Donald Trump as president.
We have elected the top Twitter troll in the country.
We have to stop pretending that race is not an issue in this country.
Now keep in mind, racism had gone away until Barack Obama brought it back.
That's right. They want to protect life so much that they want to ensure that insurance companies don't cover your maternity care. You don't see a lot of news coverage in the mainstream media of the peaceful Black Lives Matter protests that happened throughout the country.
Black Americans are hurting. Minorities in this country are hurting.
We always talk about starting from the bottom up, but the problem is the bottom up is always the least amount of power. No one cares about them, and until someone actually cares about them, then we'll do something about it.
Please, for God's sake, America, understand, acknowledge, and work towards getting to a new reality where Black lives actually matter.
Welcome back to the show. Now, if you ever miss Unbossed Live, you can certainly catch us by video on demand. So make sure that you do that. You can go to youtube.com/unbossedtyt. That is youtube.com/unbossedtyt. And the progress report, you don't want to miss this progressive reporting with this wonderful newsletter. Get the progress report, progressive news and inspiration every weekday morning. You can take that smartphone and capture that Q code and sign up right away. And also you can check out Unbossed on a podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, you can catch Unbossed. Now on to my favorite, absolute favorite part of the show. Starting with our TYT members, Biden Flavor Corn Pop. Biden Flavor Corn Pop, you know I love his name so much. All kinds of fire extinguisher emojis, fire, a mask on, and basically Biden Flavor Corn Pop said, Nina, you need to take extra care today, please, with a heart. And I will, baby. As soon as this show is over, I am going to do some things to get myself back to 100%. But I appreciate you noticing that I'm not at 100% today. God bless you. And Sexy Speed Racer, hey, Sexy Speed Racer, I love your name too. His body was a weapon. This kind of reporting is irresponsible. Indeed it is, Sexy Speed Racer. You know, Minister Malcolm X once said that the media can make us love whom they will and hate whom they will. And he spoke a whole lot of truth in his time on this earth. And those words right there, absolutely unequivocally true, that the media has the power to make us love whom they will and hate whom they will, vilify who they decide needs to be vilified, and love and lift up those who they determine need to be loved and lifted up. You better say that, Sexy Speed Racer. And on Twitch, Progressive Positive Lift, but Tuck said that white men fight honorably. You are absolutely right on that, Progressive Positive Lift. That's what Tuck said. We got another example. There are many examples of that. I mean, if I go back in history and I think about the Red Summer of 1919, you know, bloody. It was called the Red Summer because it was bloody as hell. And there was a lot of attacks on black people, black communities. 26 cities across the United States of America where white people attacked black people, and it was mainly white men. But yeah, according to Tuck, they fight honorably. Oh yeah, they do that. And many other examples that I can give you, many other. But y'all look that up. Red Summer of 1919, 26 cities. And I want you to know something, it wasn't just white vigilante extremist groups like the KKK. It was good old fashioned everyday white folks who joined in on that all over the United States of America. Now we got Mad Native Dragon. Hey, Mad Native Dragon, welcome. I think this might be the first time we're reading a comment from you. Unhoused people are ignored by most, and most people who do acknowledge them do so to use them as example of horrible criminals and treat them as less than. That would make anyone crazy. You got that right, Native Dragon. What a horrible feeling. Nobody see me, and those who do hurt me. You summed that up, Native Dragon. We all need to check ourselves on this. And then Sammy Armin III, Nina is fabulous at any age. Got me crushing over here. Ooh, Sammy, thank you, baby. I received that wholeheartedly. Thank you for lightening the mood. We need it. And Purple Pegasus 2531. Hey, Senator Turner, New Yorker here. The fact that the unhoused man died and our tax dollars pay for underfunded NYC Department of Homelessness is infuriating. You got that right, Purple Pegasus 2531. You know, as a matter of fact, that new mayor that y'all got, he just cut some of the funding to that department. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. Many thanks to everybody that commented. We couldn't get to them all, but we do appreciate you here on Unbossed so very much. A lot of just like very heavy news today. We're going to mass shootings, another day, another set of mass shootings. We are fed up with this. You got some elected officials who are too. Senator Warnock is one of those elected officials. A shooting, a hospital in Atlanta left one woman dead and 4 injured, making you realize nowhere is really safe. Take a look.
There have been so many mass shootings, in fact, about one every day in this country this year, that tragically we act as if this is routine. We behave as if this is normal. It is not normal. It is not right for us to live in a nation where nobody is safe, no matter where they are. We're not safe in our schools. We're not safe in our workplaces. We're not safe at the grocery store. We're not safe at movie theaters. We're not safe at spas. We're not safe in our houses of worship. There is no sanctuary in the sanctuary. And still we have done so very little in this building to respond.
You better say that, Reverend Senator Warnock. So very little in that building to respond. Hell, it ain't safe to turn around in somebody's driveway peaceably. It's not safe to knock on the wrong door. I mean, this gun-obsessed culture in the United States of America is maddening. And it is literally, America, literally taking lives. And we're the only industrialized nation that has such an obsession like this. So now the situation in Atlanta happened after a man became enraged during a visit to a Midtown medical facility and just opened fire. Officers initially were called to the North Side Hospital Medical in Midtown Atlanta at 12:08 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday. The suspected shooter, accompanied by his mother, was at the facility for an appointment seeking new treatment after being dissatisfied with the care he was receiving from the Department of Veteran Affairs, according to the suspect's mother. At some point, the man became agitated and used a handgun to open fire. So that's what we do now. We mad at somebody, we just open fire. He then stole a truck and a manhunt was started to find him, to which they did later today. The suspect was identified as DeLeon Patterson, and here is his mugshot right here. Just, hey, I'm dissatisfied with your services, so I'm just gonna open up fire. But the damage was done. For his victims, one person was killed and 4 others were injured. Just innocent people there trying to seek services like him. One person was killed and 4 others were injured, 3 critically in the shooting. All the victims were women. 3 of them were taken to a Grady Memorial Hospital, are in critical condition, while another patient is now stable. One of the patients was admitted with a gunshot wound to the abdomen and another with a wound to the arm. The 3rd critical patient was shot in the face. We're not safe in hospitals. We're not safe in schools. We're not safe picking up siblings from their friend's house. We're not safe in movie theaters. We're not safe in shopping centers because we do absolutely live in a gun-obsessed culture. And journalists aren't safe either. Look at this incident from a news station in Memphis. Jared Nathan, 25, is identified by his mother as the man who shot into our TV station this morning. That's not the only thing he tried. And it seems like every day, let's pull Max into this story, like every day, every other day, there's a reporter, either some type of mass shooting or somebody just shooting an individual because they have no control. They have no impulse control and they think the way to solve problems is to pick up a gun and just start shooting.
Yeah, it can feel like there's no hope and no solution to this problem. I mean, you look at Congress that has basically said there's no hope for any federal gun legislation. And that feeling, it's important to remember, is not the whole story. That in fact, in the states, Democrats have done an incredible job fighting for and winning big gun legislation, like Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan passed an 11-bill gun package that was hugely popular. That Moms Demand Action actually pushed the Republican governor of Utah to pass background checks and red flag laws. But the fact is, we can't expect the states to pick up the job of Congress. It's still a failure until we have a federal plan for gun safety, because the problem is the guns, period.
Problems are the guns, period. And in this country, the people who are those gun extremists, because many gun owners, common sense gun, they want common sense. Gun control, gun reform, call it, if you don't want to call it control, call it reform. They want it. Most gun owners do, but it is that demon seed known as the NRA that really have these elected officials in such a stranglehold that it doesn't even matter if babies are killed. Literally, these people will not move because they are beholden to the gun lobby and this entire industry, and the industry knows it. Even leveling threats, the president of the NRA actually threatened elected officials. And I'm calling on, I want to see the Department of Justice investigate them and take these threats seriously. So it is the guns. We also need elected officials who have some courage of their convictions and who are not beholden to the gun lobby. Now, just this year, over 13,000, almost 14,000 people have died from gun violence in the United States. And the year is not even halfway over. As of May 1st, 184 shootings so far in the United States of America. And as you can see on the map where you see the red dots are where the hot spots are, 184 shootings thus far. And we are just in the first week of May. And where are these deaths occurring? The majority of the deaths have occurred in the following states: Texas, California, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Illinois, and Louisiana. And there have been at least 13 K-12 shootings in the United States. Fatal gun violence in 2023. This graph right here, 578 teens and children killed in gun violence so far. Keyword, so far. And the United States has surpassed 39,000 deaths from gun violence per year since 2014. So we got a lot of work to do, Max. And it's not just legislation. For me, legislation is one part, right? Because we can't just deal with people's goodwill. We got to put laws in place. That's one part of it. The other half of it is what kind of nation are we really? And what really is in the hearts and minds of most Americans, and are we going to continue to stand idly by to let the gun lobby continue to control elected officials? Are we going to continue to vote for elected officials that are controlled by the gun lobby? At some point, Max, we got to decide whether we're going to continue to be complicit, in my opinion, and you don't necessarily have to agree with me, whether or not we are going to continue, we the people are going to continue to be complicit in our own demise.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'd love to know what you see on the ground, because it does feel in my work that we've seen a real tipping point happening here. And that's the fact that if you're a kid in America, you are most likely to die from a gun more than any other way of dying. And if you are an adult, you either have been a victim of gun violence, you know someone who's been a victim, or you know someone who knows someone. So effectively, we're reaching the same tipping point to where this is an inescapable issue. And at the same time, the NRA, which was once the most powerful gun group in America, is now struggling to even keep its lights on. And they're almost bankrupt under lawsuits and mismanagement. So there's this window, I really feel, a window now to do really powerful change. But Democrats have got to have the political will to do it.
Well, Max, I do. I really do hope that you are correct on that. I mean, some of the things that you identified and laid out about what some Democratic leaders have been doing in the states does give us some hope. However, you did point out, rightfully so, that we need federal action so that it's not just this hodgepodge from state to state, but that the federal government, as Senator Warnock laid out in his floor speech that we showed at the top of this segment, we need the federal government to have the intestinal fortitude to do something. And Max, I mean, we can't let Republicans off the hook. We're not gonna let anybody off the hook. But the 117th Congress, that was probably the best opportunity we had during this Biden presidency to really do anything about it. There was a moment in the Obama presidency that we had the opportunity to really do something about it. But in each of those times when Democrats controlled both chambers of the Congress, nothing that was deep really happened.
Yeah, it's a history of missed opportunities, and people have gotten more and more frustrated. I mean, you remember in 2007, after the Virginia Tech shooting, Democrats actually went out to the press and said, we're absolutely not going to pass any gun reform because we don't want people to think we're anti-gun.
Yes.
That's changed so much. And it's in part, that gun support for gun reform is at the highest level ever. And the answer is to hold everyone accountable. If there are Democratic politicians in your district who are soft on gun reform, find candidates who are tough on it and primary those people, because they are not helping us and they are certainly not helping you.
Yeah, there it is, Max. Oh my God. And let's return to some of our comments. We got, I think it's Sexy Speed Racer again, and jump back in here. United States of America, the world's largest open air shooting gallery. Wow. Yeah, you got that right. And thanks, NRA. By the way, what happened to investigate the investigation of the NRA taking Russian money? I'm not sure what happened to that. Putin is laughing at the chaos he's been able to cause in our country with just a small investment of laundered rubles. You might be right about that, Sexy Speed Racer, but I do love the part about what you said. Not love it, but your point about the world's largest open air shooting gallery. You got that right. And on Twitch, Layman Shaman, America has housed what was left of the Nazis post World War II, allowing them to fester and grow in our shadows. The same shadows the Confederacy has been hiding or heading in, and now they feel strong enough to come out into the sun. We need to eclipse them once and for all. We need to call Nazis what they are and put them in prison where they belong. All right, Layman Shaman, I'm not so sure that these are Nazis doing this per se, but I do understand your point. I mean, we just got to call out white supremacy, bigotry where we see it, and the whole notion of white supremacy and what it has done to this country over the generations since the inception of this country. And that same white supremacist, anti-black spirit lingers on in the 21st century. Many thanks to all of you. We about to jump on DeSantis here. We're going into Florida. Ron DeSantis has found a new way to make Floridians' lives even more of a living hell. Get a load of this headline right here. DeSantis accused of favoring insurance industry donors at residents' expense. Florida governor has lavished the industry with favors and benefits while everyday Floridians suffer. This is coming from a key report. So when we talk about the system being rigged and that politicians are for sale, this is yet another example that you will continue to hear about and to see on Unbossed. Now, a report claims the following: Ron DeSantis, the right-wing Republican governor of Florida and a likely 2024 presidential candidate, has handed favors to his big money donors in the insurance industry at the expense of cash-strapped residents of his state. The report is called "How Ron DeSantis Sold Out Florida Homeowners" and was put together by various groups. Now, the groups that contributed to this report are as follows: the American Federation of Teachers Union, Nonprofit Center for Popular Democracy, Florida Rising, and Hedge Clippers. Now, what does the report contain? The report pinpoints the insurance industry as a crucial underwriter of DeSantis' meteoric rise to the governor's mansion and as a potential White House contender, and alleges that this may have influenced his decision making. Reporting coming from David Smith of The Guardian. DeSantis, who ran a successful re-election campaign last year, and friends of Ron DeSantis, a political action committee that supported him, have taken a combined $3.9 million. Might as well just gonna round that up to $4 million in contribution from insurance industry players. If donations to the Republican Party of Florida since January 1, 2019, days before DeSantis assumed office, are added, this total swells to more than $9.9 million. Or in other words, as I was taught in math, you can go ahead and round up when it's that, $10 million. The author's analysis of campaign finance data also found that two property casualty insurance firms donated a combined total of $125,000 to DeSantis's 2023 inaugural celebration, which marked the beginning of his final term as governor in the term limited state. Now, it's no coincidence that the DeSantis administration has put insurance companies' interests over that of the citizens of that state. It is no surprise. Just go ahead and follow the money. The man is answering to his owner donors, just plain and simple, like right out in the open, not even trying to hide it. And most of which of these homeowners are battling the insurance rates that are nearly triple that of the national average. This year, insurance price hikes are expected to average 40%. And here's one specific incident. Tracy Ann Brown, 53, said by phone from Miami, quote, "The prices are horrendous. Our insurance went up to $1,800 per month, and I could not afford it with my husband's salary and my salary put together. We had a home that we had to take the insurance off, and unfortunately, our house caught fire on Easter Sunday, and we didn't have insurance on it. My God, my God." And the reporter further writes, "Instead of fixing problems, With Florida's property insurance industry, DeSantis has lavished the industry with favors and benefits while everyday Floridians suffer. Max, your thoughts?
Well, I'll tell you, Ron DeSantis is just the king of coincidences, isn't he? I mean, not just this, but this is the same Ron DeSantis who passed through his legislature funding for a bunch of new private prisons literally a month after private prison executives gave his campaign hundreds of thousands of dollars. It just seems so interesting that all of these things seem to happen for companies right after the checks hit Ron DeSantis's bank account. I mean, this is a guy who's made no secret of the fact he doesn't just have a for sale sign on his back. I mean, it's lit in neon. And the only downside here is that it's killing him with the voters that he's going to need for this presidential run. Because grifting Floridian retirees on their insurance, not exactly a way to win votes.
Oh, Max, I hope you are right. Because I say to Florida, every time we do a story about this man, I say, Florida, get your governor and don't let him become president of the United States. So Max, I want you to be right. I hope the elders in Florida really, really see that this man is not for them, but he's not for anybody of any age. Oh Lord, this man cannot become president of the United States of America. So it keeps on going. So we're going from Florida with DeSantis to the great state of Texas. The Texas state government is poised to enact a new law giving the governor-appointed Secretary of State the ability to overturn elections in the state's biggest counties. And I'm sure you can guess that some of those biggest counties, those biggest counties are very diverse, don't you? Take a look at this.
1993, Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1993 relating the authority of the Secretary of State to order a new election in certain counties.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Marshall.
19 ayes and 12 nays. The bill is passed and engrossment will hold there. Senator Middleton.
In certain counties, did y'all hear what she said? The legislation, Senate Bill 1993, passed in the Texas Senate on Tuesday by a vote of 19 to 12, as you just heard. Let's take a closer look at the bill. According to the text of the bill, the Secretary of State, a position appointed by Republican Governor Greg Abbott and is currently held by Jane Nelson, would have the authority to throw election results in counties wherein 2% or more of the polling locations ran out of ballot paper for more than 1 hour. In the event that an election was thrown out, a new one would then be held. And we know it's harder for people to go back and vote all over again, and it's a lot of confusion. But that's what they want, because Republicans can't win unless they cheating. What this means is that Governor Abbott would have precedent-setting power to reverse elections if the bill passes as expected. There's no reason, there is no excuse why we can't competently run our elections and have adequate ballot paper. Republican State Senator Mays Middleton, one of the bill's co-sponsors, said, according to the Houston Chronicle. So the question is, how did this come up? Well. The specific parameters of the bill were inspired by incidences in Harris County during the 2022 midterm elections, in which 26 out of the county's 782 polling locations were affected, according to the Houston Chronicle. Despite the relatively small number of locations affected, the issue was seized upon by Texas Republicans, some of whom claimed that the shortages cost them their races, ultimately leading to the push for legislation that resulted in Senate Bill 1993. Middleton said the shortage stopped countless people from voting on election day, like they give a damn about that. But a Houston Chronicle study concluded that the paper shortage did not alter the outcome of the elections in Harris County, defying Republicans' claim of voter suppression in GOP-leaning areas. So, Max, we have a case of never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Yeah, I mean, this law is a great example of how corruption doesn't need to be complex. I mean, there's essentially 2 steps here. One is what the Republicans did last year, which is underfund the largest county election offices in the state. And now it's step 2, is when those underfunded county election offices can't keep up with ballots, just invalidate their results and host a do-over election. I mean, this isn't peewee football. You don't get do-overs in elections because you don't like the results. And the sad thing is, this isn't just Texas. I mean, other states are using this now as a blueprint, not just to take away election results, but to essentially ban progressive activists from accessing ballot initiatives. I mean, these are multi-front wars on democracy, and almost no one in the national press is paying attention to them.
No, that is exactly right. And Max, my home state of Ohio is one of them where the Republicans have super majority. I mean, they done supered that thing up since I left the Ohio Senate. But yeah, they want to increase the threshold from a simple majority to 60% to get a ballot measure on. And that really only hurts activists who are trying to put things on the ballot. And it makes me remember Senate Bill 5, which was, anti-labor, that the Republicans passed, but the voters in the state overturned it. Thank God they did. But imagine if the bill that they're trying to pass now was in effect, may not have been able to get it on the ballot in the first place. So if they can't win straight up, they just go ahead and rig the game. And it doesn't matter that the facts point otherwise. The Houston Chronicle said that what these Republicans are complaining about is really a non-issue. They got the power, so they're changing the game. And so while the text of the legislation does not explicitly mention Harris County, the authority it would vest in the Secretary of State applies only to counties with populations higher than 2.7 million. Now, you ain't got to be a rocket science to understand where they going with this. Harris is the largest county in Texas with nearly 4.7 million residents and the only one to meet the requirement. No coincidence. With the second largest, Dallas County, boasting only 2.6 million residents, Harris County has also tipped Democratic in every presidential election since 2008. So y'all, you got your answer right there. We know exactly why they are doing this. And once again, this is all just a tactic to silence voters. It really is just that simple. Harris County Attorney Christian Menifee told the Cron that the bill was, quote, about targeting the largest county in the state, which is led by people of color. Go ahead and tell that truth. This headline right here: Black voters are transforming the suburbs and American politics. An influx of Black voters into suburbia holds enormous promise for Democrats, but Republicans are fighting back. And indeed, they're fighting back. They're fighting back by cheating. And how about this? Black Texas living in more of Houston suburbs, the Black population of suburban census tract in Harris County. And we can see that Black people are really moving into these communities. It's causing Republicans a whole lot of angst, baby. The migration of Black Americans in suburban areas was already a threat to the GOP. They know it and they're acting upon it. The suburbs were ground zero for gerrymandering this cycle. Michael Lee of the Brennan Center, or Lee, maybe, of the Brennan Center said in a Political magazine interview. Lee noted that in California, where redistricting is left to an independent commission, the GOP actively courts minority voters. But in Texas, Republican map crafters, quote, sort of decided to lean in on finding a way to make districts white, end quote. I mean, Max, they have no shame.
No, they're being completely open that they don't particularly want to hear from voters, that if anything, voters are getting in the way of Republicans instituting their plans. I mean, you're taking away people's access to amend their own constitutions. You're saying essentially we can void your results whenever you want. And as you point out, these are minority communities. So it really is like Republicans spent the last century chasing Black and brown people out of the suburbs, out of white cities. So these Black and brown communities made their own cities. But boy, the hand of Republican oppression has certainly chased them to where they went to, and is now saying, now that you're here, none of your votes are going to get to count in our state elections. How is that any different than just saying Jim Crow with a little less overt racism in the language?
There it is. It is exactly the same thing. It is just more covert. Jim Crow is wearing a suit now and sits respectably in the legislature. That's the only thing that's happening. Now the bill goes to the Republican-controlled House, and we know exactly what is going to happen. We will keep an eye on this story. Now to a friend of the show, David Sirota, that writing extraordinaire, and he warns neoliberals. David Sirota speaks truth to power, especially when it comes to establishment politics. Watch this.
What do you think Biden is doing wrong, such that he's slipping a little bit from where he was?
Well, I think that the amazing stat came from a Washington Post poll, which found that just 38% of Democrats want to see him as their own party's nominee. That is the lowest number among a president's own party. This going back decades. I don't think there really is a precedent in the modern day. The fact that there is such, I think, a lack of confidence in Biden and a lack of desire for Biden as the Democratic Party nominee really speaks to some serious problems.
And hopefully this president, this administration, or the president and the Democratic Party will take heed. David Sirota was spot on, in my opinion. The stakes in the 2024 presidential election are extraordinarily high. The twins of deception, neoliberalism and neo-fascism are colliding. And even with the present threat of neo-fascism on display in profound ways at the hands of the GOP, corporatist Dems are content with hanging out in the middle. And we know what happens when you hang out in the middle. You're gonna get ran the hell over. And let's go deeper in the article that David Sirota wrote for The Guardian. This headline right here, the Democrats think centrism will re-elect Biden. That's a dangerous assumption. The party has settled on a new playbook, shifting right and hoping demoralized voters are repulsed by Republicans. And even though I think, voters will be repulsed by the GOP, that might not be enough to get them to the polls. The Democratic Party's political class has developed a rote formula over the last decade, ignore rather than channel discontent among the party's rank and file voters, prevent competitive primaries where those voters can act on their dissatisfaction, and then hope to eke out general election victories on a wave of voter disgust with Republican Party's outlandish nominees. Your thoughts on this article, Max?
Well, I really respect David Sirota. I think he's a really incisive mind, but I do think he's missing a little nuance on the frustration here. A lot of that came from the fact that for months, the Biden team was indicating they were gonna run a campaign that ran away from social issues, that they didn't wanna make a divisive campaign in 24. That now looks like it was almost an intentional head fake to the Republicans, because Biden opened his campaign talking about abortion. He said he wants to make this about abortion, the defense of freedom, gun safety. And those are issues that a lot of progressive activists really value. So it'll be interesting to me to see if that boosts support for Biden over time, because it is a very different Biden than I think a lot of progressives thought they'd see.
Well, we shall see, Max. You and I are gonna agree to disagree on this, and that's fine. I'm all with David Sirota on this, but we will see. We got some receipts here. After a very good American Rescue Plan momentarily helped millions of people, that happened, and boosted Biden's standing among voters. Then Democrats cut off pandemic aid. They jacked up taxes on the working class. They stumped out a rail strike and didn't even help didn't put no demands on the rail barons. They expanded fossil fuel drilling amid the climate emergency. The Willow Project is worse than anything that Trump did. Part two of this, they demagogued the crime issue. And as the segment that we did a little earlier, Max, we see the Democrats are failing on calling out murder, especially if it's a black homeless person. They reappointed Trump's worker crushing Federal Reserve chair, all while abandoning the minimum wage and healthcare promises they made in 2020, spiked the football by bailing out Silicon Valley bank tech moguls while the government moved to force up to 15 million people off Medicaid. So Max, I get how you feeling about this. I totally respect your opinion, but I'm rolling with David Sirota on this one, Max. I think Democrats got a lot more work to do.
Oh, I agree with you on that. There's a lot of bridge building to do. I mean, a lot of the work here is gonna be Biden convincing the left that this is actually gonna result in something, because we've had a lot of words in the past from a lot of people and they seem to go away after the election. So if that's not the case, Biden's gonna be in trouble.
Oh yeah, and ultimately, Max, it doesn't matter what you and I think or Sirota is absolutely up to the voters, as long as you ain't got Republicans rigging the pathway for voters. That is our time today on Boss. It was so absolutely wonderful to have you on the show, Max Burns, and we cannot wait to have you back. And for all of you tuned in today, thank you so very much. All of the comments, everybody, just thank you so much for your support of the show and your support of the TYT network. Now, you know what I want you to do about this time. I always, no matter how daunting things look, no matter how bad it gets, I do want you to keep the faith. But with that faith, baby, you know what we got to do. We got to put some fight behind it. Until next time.
Welcome, friends. Welcome, family. What's up, Ma? Welcome to the Watch List, you guys. It's a Thursday edition of the show. Glad you guys could join us. We had a bit of a spirited conversation as we jumped into the show, and now my mind is on certain things that I cannot say, that now I kind of feel like saying. Glad you guys are here. Maybe I'll slip up as we go through this hour and go through all the news of the day. We've got, of course, some bad news off the top, some depressing news, some political news, of course, and off the back end, maybe we'll have a little bit of fun as we tail off on this Thursday. So to join me to go through all these things, we've got another Jackson and Jackson Thursday here. Jackson White joins me. He's Rebel HQ contributor. And a little bit of news that I'm not gonna let off in case you don't want everyone to know yet. But we've got a partner. What kind of partner?
A YouTube partner, yes. My YouTube channel has officially become partner, which means we're about to start doing a whole lot more on there, including maybe selling some Jackson and Jackson merchandise. You know what I'm saying? For the Jackson Thursday, have some dreadlocks going all over the place. You feel me? Doing it like that.
We need the cursive writing. We need the white coats. Like we're officially some pharmaceutical. They make pharmaceutical. I don't even know what the hell they do anymore.
Johnson and Johnson. Yeah. Like we selling baby powder, baby oil or something. But yes, no, definitely. That's good news and. Much due to the support of the TYT audience. So
absolutely, thank you guys also, and also congrats, brother. You deserve it. If I'm not on any of these new streams, I'm going to be highly.
We gonna make it happen. We gonna make it happen because that's what I'm saying. One step at a time. Now that I've cleared this step, it's time to do many more things. So
absolutely. Let's jump into the many more things that we're going to be doing today, Jackson. Of course, as I mentioned, we start off with some of the troubling news that's going on in the world. We talked yesterday about this now deemed a homicide that happened on a New York City subway with one unhoused individual and a former, I believe, Marine. More folks are catching on to it and more folks are appalled by it. Let's watch what's going down now.
It's really, really scary to watch poverty be engaged with in a violent way, to see how a lot of us are closer to homelessness than we are to being millionaires. And so to see someone be treated like that as a homeless person is scary for people who are unhoused, or scary people who are at risk of being homeless, whose rent is overdue, whose rent is being increased, whose shelter is the next step. So it's really, really scary in a city that is going through a housing crisis to see homeless people being murdered.
Stop calling the cops because someone's asking you for food and they didn't even hurt you and you feel like you can take their life.
Protests are erupting in New York City. That is after Jordan Neely, the man that was murdered on the New York City subway, has been catching more attention. And as actually we're seeing that video get circulated, folks are sick of this stuff, especially with the response that has come from it, which we're gonna dig into those details. But first of all, one more other parts about Jordan Neely and who he was. Folks are upset because he was one of those folks that they saw on subways trying to find any way he could, as in this video here shows, trying to get some kind of cash or raise some kind of funds. He was also Michael Jackson impersonator as well. But when he went on that train and was complaining about being hungry, being tired of being hungry, thirsty, and looking for a place to sleep and sit down every once in a while, that's when the attack then jumped on him from some of those eyewitness reports. A little bit more though, because Marxist 777 pointed this out as well about his background and a bit of a clearer picture of who he was. On Monday, he said he was lynched. On the New York City subway, he started telling passengers that he was fed up with being hungry, thirsty, and having no place to rest. Then he was, as he was shouting in that frustration, an ex-Marine, as I pointed out, then jumped on him and murdered him. Maybe some of the activity that's surrounding this is because AOC has gotten involved, and she was tweeting about this as well and how appalled she was to read this. She said he was also murdered, Jordan Neely was murdered, but because Jordan was houseless and crying for food in a time when the city is raising rents and stripping services to militarize itself, while many in power demonize the poor, the murderer gets protected with passive headlines and no charges. And it's disgusting. And she linked to that New York Times headline that we mentioned yesterday that talked about how somehow he got choked out by some unknown figure and happened to somehow pass away on that subway by himself. Who knows? She also talked about how these politicians have approached this stuff as well, and how they're not quick to really jump on and talk about what it is that happened. This in response to what the mayor of New York City also posted. She said, "This honestly feels like a new low. Not being able to clearly condemn a public murder because the victim was of a social status some would deem, quote, too low to care about. Now, the last sentence is especially rich from an administration trying to cut the very services that could have helped him. And here's a piece of that that Adams put out. And that last sentence that she's mentioning is, he says, I need all elected officials and advocacy groups to join us in prioritizing getting people the care they need and not just allowing them to languish. How would that work? We're going to put some kind of funds towards helping folks avoid homelessness, or actually against the way that housing prices are on the rise and people are being exploited. And we actually give people reason to do things like this, and leads us to these types of problems. Now, those same folks that are part of the policymakers and everyone who leads us to these problems will complain about people like Jordan Neely being on subways scaring people by yelling about his situation and also his mental health issues there as well. But one other part here before you jump in here, Jackson, because as I mentioned, Eric Adams was talking about this, and he wasn't very happy with AOC's approach and also her criticisms of him. So as he was pointing this out, he said she was a little bit too soon to jump on this, and it's irresponsible to toss out these fire-breathing tweets that talk about the way our society treats unhoused and also the way our politicians just don't give a hot damn about anybody. I think it struck a little bit too close to home for him, and he wants her to calm down with this whole thing. Here he is on CNN talking about it, and also doubling down on how much he thinks we should wait and see before we talk about how someone was murdered.
Each situation is different, and how a passenger, we have so many cases where passengers assist of the riders, and we don't know exactly what happened here until the investigation is thorough. And each situation is different. I was a former transit police officer, and I responded to many jobs where you had a passenger assist someone. And so we cannot just blatantly say what a passenger should or should not do in a situation like that. We should allow the investigation to take its course.
All right.
Jackson, we can't just tell people not to murder someone on the subway because you feel like you can. We can't say that. I thought we had laws that said that.
Well, Eric Adams has always kind of struck me as just kind of a strange guy, and that's kind of like his reputation. He's just kind of weird. Like whenever something happens, you can count on Eric to give just kind of a weird or unnecessary take.
True.
So that's just kind of what he does. But this story really points out the huge issue of homelessness in the country. Over 500,000 people who are unhoused, many of them facing mental health issues, as you pointed out, and also many of them who are in fact working. And a lot of the issues that this country faces are both easily fixable and unnecessary. I'm here in the NYC area, you're in the LA area. These are the two cities, two locations with the highest density of homelessness. And, when we look at these issues, what's a lot of the ways that we respond? Putting spikes under bridges, or, making it such that people can't sleep on benches, instead of creating, homeless shelters, instead of creating programs that can help people get themselves off of hard drugs like heroin and things like that, instead of improving the healthcare system. It pretty much every major issue that we have, we try to sweep it under the rug, but this wouldn't have happened, or it would have been a much less likely chance of it happening if he had resources accessible to him where he could sleep or where he could just get a sense of peace. You know what I mean? So him dancing on the subway is just a normal part of New York life, a normal part of LA life. He's just a regular human being who got taken out for needing shelter, basically, nothing more.
And when our society finds folks in this situation, they get upset at them over it. Again, I've said it many times. The argument ends up being like, oh, you libs or whoever else. I won't even divide it amongst libs and conservatives. But you folks who have this bleeding heart for anyone else who's less fortunate, finds themselves in these types of situations, why don't you take one of them in? That's actually one of the comments that was posted under AOC's comments there. So, similarly, the way they said something to Bernie Sanders about how he's a millionaire and therefore how come he doesn't donate his entire money, and then therefore that'll fix the problems with our country and how we don't tax billionaires or anyone else that makes money, right? So that doesn't actually solve the problem. So AOC can take in 5 homeless folks, but there's not 5 homeless folks in New York City, there's tons. So if our society has to do something about it, we collectively have to do something. Now, if the reasons we won't say that is because then we'll have to give something would have to go into the system that actually helps people that are in these situations, which this is what they're leaving off. If those folks are helped out, our problems, our issues with having maybe things stolen, people are breaking into something, people with mental health issues, scaring some people on these subways, there might be fewer of those people, or they might be in situations where they don't find themselves on a subway screaming and scaring at folks who don't know what's going on, or who would assume that this guy's coming to hurt them, and then leads to the individual who, by the way, hasn't been named, arrested, or anything else, to then jumping on his back and choking him out for 15 minutes while everyone else goes, well, that's better because I feel better about myself because that person who isn't worth their life can die in front of me now. That's the society that we've bred. And if you don't want to do anything about it, you shouldn't complain once someone says,